Hello everyone and welcome to the GradStar Webinar. The purpose of this webinar is to talk about some new checks that are being put into GradStar that you need to know about, especially as we come up on the fall semester and you'll be doing a lot of GradStar entries. So what we'll cover is why have additional checks why are they being added to GradStar? How might the new checks impact award recipients? What are the new checks? There are two of them, and we'll talk about those. And how you can prevent errors in your GradStar entries. So first of all, why were new checks added to GradStar? Why are they being added to GradStar? You may or may not be aware, but since we've gone live, we've had a fair amount of entries into GradStar that have had errors in them. And there are several reasons for these errors, such as no budget was set up for the chart field string that was entered. Maybe it was related to an OSR project and that budget hadn't been set up yet. Maybe there wasn't enough budget. We ran into an insufficient budget error. Or it could be that the amount field on the line when you enter your GradStar entry was a negative amount or a zero amount. Sometimes what happens is people mistake the description field for the amount field and they enter a description and the amount, and then the system recognizes that as a negative or a zero amount. And that's actually an error and something that doesn't allow the entry to post. So while the award recipients have continued to get their awards since we've gone live, you may not be aware that because we've had these errors, it's caused some significant problems in our accounting for them that have caused a few people to spend quite a bit of time fixing those errors so that our accounting is correct. And so the reason for these new checks was that we can make sure that the entries are correct at the point of entry before they get posted into the system, and that we don't have to do a lot of fixing after the fact. So one thing that you should be aware of is that going forward, if there are errors in the entries into GradStar, it won't get posted, and that would lead to the award recipient not getting their award. So that's just something that you need to be aware of that will happen as we move forward. Okay, so let's talk about what are the new checks. There are two of them. They are in the area of edit errors and budget errors. So let's talk about the edit errors first. So what will happen is, if your entry has an edit error, and I'll name what those are in a minute, and you click Save, an error message will immediately appear on your screen, and it'll tell you, you have an edit error, and you need to resolve that edit error. And so what are edit errors? Let's talk about those. They could be things like if your chart field that you entered doesn't exist in the system. Say, for example, you enter account number 123456. Well, we don't have an account number 123456, and so that would give you an error. Another thing is that if you enter a combination of chart fields, such as fund and source, that don't fit together. Sources belong to certain funds, and if you don't match them correctly, you'll get an error. And that's just one example of a correct combination. There are several rules around chart field combinations in the system that if you enter a chart field string that is invalid according to one of those rules, then you will get an error. A third error would be, as I mentioned on a previous slide, if you enter in the amount field a negative or a zero amount, that will also get an error. You have to have a positive amount, dollar amount in the amount field. So what will happen is that you'll get, if you have an error against one of these areas, you'll get an immediate message pop up on your screen saying that you have an edit error, and you'll need to resolve that edit error and click Save again. And so you really can't go very far if you've got one of these types of errors, so you'll know immediately if you do. So that's edit errors, and that's the first change, because prior to this check, there wasn't any message that popped up that immediately told you that you have an issue. And just be aware, the system won't save any entries that have these type of errors. Okay, the second type of error is a budget error. And for this new check that's been put in the system, it's basically checking for valid budget. And what happens is, if you say enter your GradStar entry on a Tuesday, this check takes approximately 1 day to run through its cycle and determine if there is valid budget and sufficient budget. And if you have an error, you will get an email notification the following day saying that your GradStar entry has failed budget check. So this error or this check is a little bit different from the edit error check in that it takes about a day for you to know whether you have an error in budget, or it takes a day anyway for you to get the message. There's some checks that you can do ahead of time to know, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, whether your chart field string will pass. Okay, but if you have an error, it will take a day for you to get the email notification. All right, so if you get one of these budget errors, you'll need to resolve the budget error either by setting up or increasing budget so that your entry will pass. And please note, for this option, you don't need to edit the original entry. So say if you get this budget error and the error is that there's no budget set up, or there's not sufficient budget, rather, and the solution is to set up that budget or increase the amount so that the actual chart field you entered on your original entry will pass, then you just leave that entry alone, because the entry will continue to go through nightly budget checking until it passes. So there's really no need to touch the GradStar entry itself if on the budget side that it's being fixed on that, so that that original entry will pass. Okay, so that's option A. But if option B is that you are going to use a different chart field string or make an edit to your original entry, then you need to inactivate your original entry and enter the new one with the new chart field string that you want to use. Okay? So also, just like the edit errors, the system won't process entries if you have budget errors. So just know, for edit errors or budget errors, which are the two types of errors you get on any transaction, it won't process if you've got either type of these errors. All right, so those are the two errors, edit errors and budget errors. And so now let's talk about how you can prevent these errors, because nobody wants to get them, and certainly everybody wants their award recipients to get their awards. So first thing, you can double check with your finance team before you make your GradStar entries, just to make sure you're using the correct chart field strings and that budget has been set up. So just do the prevention work on the front side. Second, you can use this tool called the chart field checker, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a minute, to see if your chart field string is going to pass. It's a tool that's been built several months ago, not expressly for GradStar, but it certainly is a very good use of it for this purpose. So you can use this chart field checker to know immediately if your chart field string is going to pass. And then you can always double check your work. Just enter your GradStar entries with some care and make sure, as I mentioned before, like in the amount field, you're not entering the description. Make sure the amount has a positive number and that you actually enter the chart fields and amounts that you meant to enter. Okay, kind of basic, but easy enough to make a mistake in that kind of area. All right, and if you do get a budget error, just know that there will probably be a fair number of instances when you get a budget error that you'll need to work with your finance team to resolve it, because it might be that, especially for chart field strings that are for OSR projects or charged to an OSR project, it could be that the budget for that project hasn't been set up yet, or there's not sufficient budget. So your finance team might need to help out with that, to either work with OSR or budget office or the budget office, and it might be that you need to get a different chart field string for a certain period of time. So there might be several considerations that your finance team might need to make and might need to, help you through that process. All right, so let me talk about this chart field checker tool. It's really very handy, and as I said, this is a very good use of it. So basically, the chart field checker allows you to see if a chart field string has edit or budget errors. You enter one chart field string at a time, and the system displays the results immediately. So you can immediately know if your entry is going to pass. We have created, the training team has created a quick reference card. I've got the link to it here. I've also got some other links, including this one on the reference page at the end of this presentation. So it's just a handy tool to know what all the fields mean and things like that. But I'm going to walk through the chart field checker here and kind of just talk about how it works. So first of all, you would just log in to the chart field checker. I've got the URL here. It's also listed on that quick reference card I just mentioned. And when you log in, you immediately see this page here, which would be blank. It would have no entries completed. And so what you would do is enter your chart field string in its entirety into this field and the amount. Okay, so make sure that you enter the complete chart field string, because otherwise it's not going to be a valid check for you. And particularly if your chart field string is charged to an OSR project, then make sure that you enter all three chart fields related to OSR projects: the project costing business unit, the project, and the activity. For the budget date field, if you leave this field blank, it assumes the current date, so that it would check your chart field string assuming budget as it sits today. However, you can put a future date in there, and what that would do is tell you, is this chart field string going to pass budget 3 months from now, for example, because in the case of OSR projects particularly, they have end dates where once we go past that end date, no chart field string with that project ID on it is going to pass. So this is a nice feature for you to be able to check future dates. On the amount field, again, just make sure that you've entered the correct amount and that it's a positive amount, okay? Here to do your check, and then also make sure that you enter that on the GradStar entry itself. So once you've entered in your complete chart field string, then click Submit, the Submit button, and what happens is immediately you get a message, and if your chart field string is okay, then you get this message up here in black, says chart field string and amount are valid, and you are good to go. And you can enter that chart field string into GradStar. Now I will say that you want to, if you have a valid chart field string and amount, based on the chart field checker, you want to make that entry into GradStar as soon as possible, because things are always changing. You know, charges are being made against budget, so there's nothing to say that if the chart field string passes today, that it's still going to pass next week. So you want to make your entries into GradStar pretty soon after you check that the chart field string and amounts will pass budget checking. Okay. If you enter your chart field string and amount into GradStar and there is an error, what will happen is immediately you'll get a message in red saying what the error is. And here I have just one example. I've got all the examples or the possible messages on the next slide. But here as an example is what will happen. It'll tell you what the error is, budget date out of bounds in red. The string in this is your indication that this string is not going to be successful if you enter it in GradStar. You are going to get either, an edit error message or immediately, or sometime the next day you're going to get a budget error message. So if you get a red message, you want to go ahead and address what the issue is and not enter this entry into GradStar. Okay, so the possible messages that Chart Field Checker will give you if you have an error are no budget exists, meaning, and usually that will be OSR related, that the project budget hasn't been set up yet. Also OSR related is the project budget date is out of bounds, meaning that the project end date has passed. You've exceeded budget. The last two are edit error related. You've got an invalid combination of chart fields, or you've got an invalid value, either on the chart field side or the amount side. All right, so in summary, what do we have? Basically, we've got some new checks that have been put into GradStar. For the edit error check, you'll get an immediate error message telling you that you have an edit error. And for the budget error, you're going to get an email notification sometime the next day indicating that you have a budget error. Any entries with errors can't be processed, okay? They will not get posted. And in this case, it will affect whether the award recipient will get their award. You can use the chart field checker to see if your chart field string will pass. And also, just importantly, you may need to, or in often cases, work with your finance team or manager on whatever the error is, especially if it's related to a budget error. Okay, one last thing. Here's a list of references for you related to this topic. Under this link here, ccinfo.unc.edu, under the Training and Resource Documents tab, there are several things. Under this category, which is the finance category, if you select chart fields, you'll have on the list the chart field checker tool, which is a quick reference card. And there's also another document called Combo Edit Rules, which lists the ways that your combinations of chart fields could fail. So either you or your finance manager might find that useful if you get a combination error. Also, if you select GradStar under this drop-down, you'll see a recording of this webinar and also this PowerPoint that you just watched. And so those are the references for you. So that concludes this webinar. Thank you very much.